This video will show you how to replace the rear strut assembly on a Pontiac Grand Prix. You'll have one of these on each side of the rear of the vehicle, and the process will be the same. Let's get into it. To gain access to the upper hardware for the rear struts, we need to make our way inside the trunk. Now, we are working along the driver's side of the vehicle, but the process will be the same on either side of the vehicle, and whenever you do these struts, you always do them as a pair. So looking along one side of the vehicle, I'm just going to pull back on my carpeting enough that I can gain access to my hardware. As I look in here, I can see two of my 15mm headed mounting nuts. There's a third on the forward side there. It essentially forms a triangle. Go ahead and remove all three pieces of hardware. There's our first mounting nut. Now we can continue on with the rest of the hardware. I'm going to the forward mounting bolts. This one's fairly difficult to see, so I'm going to remove my rubber protective boot. I can lift that up and off of there. All right, on to the last piece of hardware. All right, so we're done in the trunk for now. Let's make our way outside of the vehicle. Now the next thing we have to do is safely raise and support the rear of the vehicle with the suspension hanging so we can remove our rear wheel. Once you've done that, we're going to remove all 5 of our 19mm lug nuts and remove the wheel. Now that we have the wheel out of the way, we're looking directly in this area. We can see the bottom of the rear strut. We can also see the upper portion of our rear sway bar link. We need to separate the two. Now in this area, I can see my hardware. I'm going to be using some penetrant. Clearly, I do have some rust here. To replace the rear strut, you're going to find that you have to remove the sway bar link. It could potentially get damaged. I recommend replacing the sway bar links at the same time. Now on my application for my sway bar link, along the back side of this bracket where the sway bar link comes through, the sway bar link actually has an area that I can grab onto with a 14mm wrench. So I'm just making my way along there. That's going to prevent the stud from spinning while I continue on with the mounting nut. Now for the mounting nut, I'm going to be using a 16mm. All right, so that's loose enough. I can remove the mounting nut. We'll separate that sway bar link from the rear strut. Now we're going to apply support underneath the lower suspension. Just a little bit of pressure here. Now we're looking along the lower aspect of the rear strut assembly. We can see the mounting bolts that hold the knuckle in place. We're using a 21mm for each one of the mounting nuts. As for the mounting bolts, these are splined bolts, so we'll have to drive them out of position. I'm going to start with the upper hardware first. We'll fully remove the hardware, give it a quick inspection, start it back in. After starting the mounting nut back on a couple threads, we're going to start tapping this out and through. Sometimes you can use a hammer, other times it may be helpful to use an air hammer, whatever's easiest for you. We can see the splines on our bolt. It has come loose. Let's leave that in place. Repeat the process for the next piece of hardware located just below it. Now we can alter the height of the suspension as necessary, taking pressure off of our mounting hardware. When we do remove this, keep in mind it's the last thing holding our rear strut assembly in place. Once you have it out, we're going to carefully start bringing the rear strut down, then we'll pull it out through the rear wheel well. Just use a small pry bar to help us separate this. Let's set that aside. Go ahead and remove that from the vehicle. There it is, friend. Prior to installing any brand new part, let's make sure we clean and inspect the mounting area. So we're looking at the rear knuckle. We want to clean along both surfaces, out here and on the opposite side. I'm just going to use a wire brush. You can use some sandpaper if necessary. Now we're making our way up to the top. Close inspection here as well. Now let's prepare to install the rear strut. We're starting down along the bottom. We're going to carefully start lowering the strut down into position. Then we have to lift it up towards the body. Now in this instance, it's easiest if you have a second person. They're going to reach inside of the trunk and start on the upper hardware. They don't need to tighten it. These two are started on. Now that I have all three pieces of hardware started on, while I'm still in the trunk, I'm going to be installing my protective boot in this area. It has to go underneath the body, but up above the top of the front strut assembly. Should be able to slide this in as necessary. After starting on that hardware, we're still looking inside of our wheel well. We have to align our knuckle with the lower portion of our rear strut. We'll alter the height of the suspension, up or down as necessary. This can be done with your jack. Once you have the lower piece of hardware started in, we'll make our way to the upper piece of hardware. We can angle the knuckle as necessary. Continuing on, we'll start on both mounting nuts. Once you have the hardware started on, bottom it out and then torque it to 89 foot-pounds. When we go to tighten this, we need to make sure we draw the nut inward until the flange is completely up against the rear strut. Double check to make sure each piece of hardware is properly secured in place. Remove support from under the suspension. Now that we have the strut in place, let's pay attention to our sway bar link. We want to make sure that it's not damaged in any way. I don't see any grease coming out of that protective boot. This looks good. It's time to attach the upper portion of the sway bar link to the rear strut. We can flex the sway bar as necessary. Once you have that stud in place, continue on with your mounting nut. The torque for this will be 38 foot-pounds. All right, let's torque it down, 38 foot-pounds. Let's install our rear wheel. Once you have your wheel in place, start on all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts. We'll bottom them out. Get the wheel back on the ground and torque all of them to 100 foot-pounds. Now that I have the wheel back on the ground, I'm going to be torquing each one of my lug nuts to that 100 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Now with the full weight of the vehicle back on the ground, we're looking in the trunk along where our strut is. We have to snug and torque our hardware. The torque for this is 33 foot-pounds. All 3 pieces of hardware are secured and our protective boot is in place. Let's install our carpeting across this area. Okay friend, we showed you the installation of one side of the vehicle's rear strut assemblies. The process for one side of the vehicle is the exact same thing as the other. Whenever you do these, we always recommend doing them as a pair. Aside from that, you can go ahead and close the hood, you take your vehicle for a road test, listen for any odd noises, and get yourself in alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.